After that video where I looked into exactly how Scottish all the more Ardain names are, I decided that I'd want to do something with a different set of characters. And then I realized, oh wait, there's actually a Xeno game where the majority of the characters are humans from actual sorta contemporary Earth. So today we're going to be looking at the origins of the names of the main characters in Xenoblade X and trying to see if we could tell where they're from based on that. Now, remember, the White Whale is a United States ship. So while there was a United Earth military force, and I believe a United government as well, it's very likely that most of the crew of the ship was from the US, or at least living there at the time it launched, because many other countries also launched ships. We know of at least one from Europe, and at least one from Asia, so it's likely that at least from North America is where the majority of the people on the White Whale were living, and since the US is a big country, there was probably another ship on the East Coast, so we're looking like western half of the US, maybe some Canada, and probably Mexico would be on the West Coast ship as well, but of course it is possible that other foreign nationals are there, and you're gonna see a lot of the characters are not necessarily European American, and while they might not necessarily be from the country or from the region their name suggests, they could be that American, descended from immigrants or immigrants themselves. Although it is worth pointing out that in the English dub at least, which while the language is canon, I don't know if the actual words they're saying and what they sound like is canon, everyone speaks pretty much perfect American English, and almost no one has an accent suggesting that they come from anywhere outside of North America, which, if you want to believe that, heavily leans into the fact that most, if not all of these characters either learned English at a young age or it was their first language, and they learned it from either the US or Canada, so it is very likely that what I'm getting at with these names is just their heritage or where they're descended from. Now, obviously, in the real world, the origin of someone's name isn't an exact indicator of where they come from or who they're descended from, but in this context, I'm going to assume that it is, and you'll soon find that the majority of people's first and last names match, coming from the same area, so I think it's reasonably okay to make that assumption here. Also, I'll be talking about the vast majority of playable party members, and going into a bit of their affinity missions, as well as some story stuff, so this is going to contain spoilers. With that disclaimer out of the way though, let's get to our first character. We're gonna skip Elma for obvious reasons, so first up is Lin Li Ku. Lin is a Chinese family name when spelled as it is in-game, and with a different spelling but the same pronunciation is also a pretty common girl's name across Europe. That can be spelled a few different ways. Li is also a name originating from the English language, and the same origin can also be used as a last name. Li is also a Chinese family name that was picked up by Korea and I think Vietnam as well. Neither of those matter though, because in Japanese, her first name is Lin Li, one word, spelled Lynlee, which does not seem to be a common name from anywhere, but when it is used, seems to be a derivative of the European first name of Lin. Ku is also a Chinese family name, though the specific spelling given in-game is more commonly used in South Korea, but there is also a European version of that as a last name. So, yeah, she could be anything, really. She's most likely European, Chinese, or Korean. She could be a mix of 2 or 3 of those. That's entirely possible. Like, maybe the last name comes from a Chinese or Korean family member, but she has a Western first name, because that's a common thing. Or she could be one or the other. The other thing is, while X is a bit better than most things with an anime art style at being able to easily distinguish white people and light-skinned Asian people, she's kind of, I can't tell, myself. And I've seen people disagree on it, so yeah, she's one of those things. This one's a bit less conclusive than most of them. But next up is Gwyn Evans, who is significantly easier because Gwyn is a Welsh name, though it seems to be more common as a last name. I'm not surprised that it's a Welsh name, but I am slightly surprised that it is an actual name. I kind of thought it was something that was made up. But I'm stupid, so what do you know? Evans is also pretty much exactly the same, sometimes used as a first name, more commonly as last, and as Welsh. So he's probably of Welsh descent. But I'm also going to bring this up because I thought of it recently and it's funny. My new headcanon is that Gwyn Evans is a distant relative of Chris Evans. And when he was a kid, he got confused when watching his movies and thought that he was actually Captain America, which is the first thing that inspired him to join the military. Which, like, is extra funny because that's pretty in character for him. He's already, like, the most typical good all-American boy character in the cast. Like, I think he was actually a farm boy or something. And he lost a best friend on an early military expedition. So that was just funny. It's not really relevant to the video at all. But what is relevant is the next character, Doug Barrett. Assuming his full name is actually Douglas, that is a first name of Scottish origin, and Barrett is a popular last name in a few places, but seems to be most common in Ireland, although the word itself is Norman in origin, so he's probably UK or Irish, somewhere from around there. Next up is Irina Akulov. Irina, the name itself, is from a Greek word, but nowadays the name is most commonly used in Slavic countries. Akulov is also a real last name that seems to be most common in Russia, so out of anything, she's most likely Russian, but realistically she could be from most of the Slavic nations. Next up is Lao Huang. Both of his names are Chinese names, so he is most likely Chinese, but as a bit of an addendum, we know his wife and daughter were named Charmaine and Chenxi, though we don't necessarily know which is which. It's heavily implied that Charmaine is his wife and Chenxi is his daughter, so Charmaine is a French name and Chenxi is a combination of Chinese names, so it could be a few things. He could have married a European or white American woman and given his daughter a Chinese name. He could have married a Chinese woman with a Western first name, or Chenxi was his wife. It doesn't really matter, but there are a few ways you could throw around your headcanons for what his family is actually like. Moving into the recruitable characters, we're just going to take these in alphabetical order. Next is Bose Lowe's. His first name gave me a lot of trouble because with the accent, it doesn't really seem to be something that's used much at all. Like, if you Google search Bose with the accent on the E, the first result you'll get is his entry on the Xenoblade wiki. So I could get almost nothing for it, although Bose, without the accent and pronounced differently, is a name that is Western European in origin, most likely from Old English. Lowe's is also English in origin, so because of the first name weirdness, we can't exactly tell where he's from, but he's almost certainly not anywhere in Asia because of just the way he treats and reveres Eastern culture and stuff, and he calls it Eastern culture and not like culture or traditions from this place or specifically like Buddhism or something. He is a weeaboo. He is almost certainly not from there or has been immersed in any of that culture besides picking it up as basically like a hobby or something. So yeah, he's a bit of a weird one just in general. But moving on, we've got the two Kristoff brothers, Fogg and Fry. Fry is an English name, though it's more commonly seen as a last name. Fogg isn't really a name at all, especially spelled with a PH, though the word fog, meaning like foggy cloud stuff, is Scandinavian in origin, and Kristoff is the German version of Christopher. So these two are almost certainly European, possibly English, and slightly more likely to be German and just have more English-derived first names. Next is HB himself. His real name is Hector Birtwistle. Hector comes from Greek, but it was picked up by a lot of Western Europe, while Birtwistle is an English surname with some Old Norse influence, which means he is probably English. Next is Hope Alonzi. Hope is an English language name that, of course, literally means hope. Other European languages have names with the exact same meaning, but they translate the word hope, so hope in a different language is a name in countries that don't speak English. She was raised in a church and might have gotten the name from there, so being named after a theological virtue kind of makes sense. But we know she's an orphan, we don't know where she got her first name. Alonzi, on the other hand, could be a couple things. A mishmash of some Italian stuff. In Arabic surname, if you put a hyphen between the AL and the Anzi part, these two actually might be connected since Arabic influenced Italian, but the Italian name might be Latin in origin, so I don't really know here. or it could be a corruption of the French phrase allons-y. So she's probably at least partially European, and part of that might be Italian, French, possibly part Arabic, maybe somewhere else around the Mediterranean as well. Next up on the I forgot this person has a full name list is Murderess, who reveals in one of her affinity missions that her real name is Sharon Effinger. Sharon is a name of Hebrew origin, but is most commonly used as a female first name in the English-speaking world, while Effinger is a German and Swiss last name. This just means that she was from some rich family that is German or Swiss in origin, most likely, but it is worth pointing out that there was a von Effinger family in the Swiss nobility. This died out in the 1900s, but maybe she's a distant relative of that, and that's where her ancestors and her parents got their fortune from. Next, we have Kentaro fucking Nagi, and he's got a couple interesting quirks. Kentaro is a Japanese name, while Nagi is actually a name in both Japanese and Arabic, although the names have completely different origins and I believe different meanings as well. Despite this though, I'm pretty sure he is supposed to be Japanese, what with the katana, the slight spiritual successorness to Jin Uzuki, who is definitely Japanese, also the samurai art names, and the fact that in the Japanese version, I think he's one of the few characters whose full name is said in the Eastern style of family name, personal name, as opposed to first name, last name, which not only suggests that, yes, he is Asian and the Japanese name suggesting he's Japanese specifically, but also the fact that he might actually be from Japan or heavily in touch with his Japanese heritage as opposed to just straight up being Japanese American. For the other party members, we're going to go check on Mia a bit later, but there are two we're just going to skip because Yelv is not human, and Alexa doesn't have a last name, and since her first name is common enough in some form around the world, her having darker skin doesn't really help narrow it down, so I can't really say anything about her. Moving on to some allies, though. Maurice Chausson, both his first and last names are French. He's probably French. And then we get to good old Jack Vandam. Jack is an extremely common name to the point where it probably doesn't say much about him, and while Vandam, as it's spelled, isn't a very common name, there are several variations on it that are all Dutch surnames. He's most likely named after actor Jean-Claude Van Damme, who is Belgian, and his mother is specifically from the Dutch part, and while Van Damme is actually a stage name, it still accurately reflects where he's from, so it is possible that this Vandam in X is also at least part Dutch. It is also worth noting that Jack is sometimes a nickname for John. John and Jean have the same origins, so out of all the Vandams in the Xenoblade series, this one is definitely the closest to just being named Jean Vandam. And we don't know his middle name. It could be Claude. So, you know, there we go. Rounding out the human characters, we're just going to touch on Mia for a second. She only has a known first name, and it's so common that it can't really say much about where she's from, but we do know that she has two dads. Assuming they're married and legally are her guardians, or were, because they're dead and she's an adult, it can be assumed that she comes from a country where gay marriage is legal. That would narrow things down to a small number, but keep in mind, she hasn't been born in the real world for at least another decade, and there's always the possibility more countries will legalize it, so we can't really say, yes, she's probably from this specific list of countries, because this list might change in the future, and yeah, then she could be from more. Also, we don't know if she's adopted or not, so she's not necessarily the same race as either of her dads, which doesn't really help with anything. Lastly, though, we are going to touch on Elma. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, she ain't human. She's just from a different planet. She's not from anywhere on Earth. But keep in mind, her mimeosome had to be designed after something. First, we'll just talk about the name Elma itself. It means a few things in a few different languages, but most importantly, contains El, which is a Hebrew term for God, and something that comes up a lot in the Xeno series, and one version of the name likely comes from the Latin word for kind, which both of them fit her very well. Now, Mimizome Elma looks a lot like Telos from Xenosaga Episode 3, while Elma's true form looks a lot like Cosmos' version 3 from the same game. And yes, I finally started playing Xenosaga, so I know how to pronounce Cosmos' name correctly. Thanks everyone in the comments who told me I was saying it wrong, but not actually how to correctly say it for like the past year. But anyway, Xenosaga 3 spoilers. Telos is revealed to have been built from the remains of Mary Magdalene. Yes, that one! And in a live version of Mary is also shown in a few flashbacks. She's depicted as Middle Eastern there. The real one was also most likely Middle Eastern, so Elma's Mim is also most likely Middle Eastern. But yeah, that was a video about video games. I hope you enjoyed my video about video games, and will like, comment, and subscribe so you can get notifications about more videos I release about video games. I don't really have a thing to say anymore. I've run out of things to say a long time ago, but thank you for watching. When this goes up, I will be on vacation, so don't be too awful in the comments. I won't be able to see and moderate them. But until next time, this is Luxin, signing off.